Listen, since 1992, for reasons that are beyond me, although our next guest might help us, Philip Duncan and WeatherWatch New Zealand is going to join us to talk about what seems to be an interminable and odd civil war in the forecasting industry between Metservice and NIWA. The government have now finally lost patience. This is the last government have finally lost patience and sparked a long overdue, I have to say, review of the weather forecasting sector. But our next guest certainly will have a view on that, given that there does seem to be an odd war in that public area at least. And Philip Duncan from WeatherWatch New Zealand joins us to give us a bit of an update and an insight as to how it all happened. Welcome to the show, Philip. Lovely to have you on.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
First of all, before we talk about NIWA and Metservice, what do you do, WeatherWatch New Zealand? And how did you start up?
So we started up, we were working for the radio network originally, which nowadays is, NZME, the Herald and all of them.
Yeah.
And we set up a weather business there because they were sort of getting into traffic, and we thought, well, we could do weather in the same way. And then in 2009, the recession kind of hit and media industry had a lot of trouble. And so I thankfully managed to negotiate kind of an exit strategy to because I was being made redundant, but I could keep the business. So set off WeatherWatch independently in 2010, and we've become New Zealand's most popular private forecaster thanks to getting data from other governments, from the USA in particular and Australia.
Well, that's just the question I was about to ask you. How do you go about forecasting the weather when Metservice and NIWA are owned by the New Zealand taxpayer and are the bodies that are responsible for it? You're saying the weather is so, forecastable that you can go to an Australian-based or a US-based organisation and they can let you know what's going on in New Zealand?
Yeah, because put it this way, the US government, they are the most famous for having weather data that's freely available for any country in the world to use. And I got a chance to meet with the US ambassador, Scott Brown, down in the US Embassy a couple of years ago in Wellington. And I said to him, with Donald Trump in power at the time, and he was pulling all these things from people saying, you don't get free stuff off us. I said, are you guys going to pull the US data? And he went, no, because we've got military bases all around the world. It's actually in our interest to have that information out there and being used. Very different to the belief of our government, which is we want our government agencies to be powerful and to be strong, and the product they make is irrelevant. It's just as long as they're strong and powerful. So the government's designed it to keep NIWA in power, regardless of accuracy or regardless of what services they provide.
So let me get this also right. You're saying that the forecast that you give for today and for tomorrow draws on sources that aren't based in New Zealand but are as accurate as anything that NIWA or Metservice do? More
accurate. The data we use has been, from IBM, has been well known to be independently verified as the most accurate in the world. They throw their supercomputer at it, which New Zealand doesn't have any kind of resources to match the IBM supercomputer. NIWA's one is very, very small, and in fact, they're now wanting another $10, $20, $30 million for yet another tax-funded supercomputer, which I don't understand because they rope it off. I can't even use it unless they charge me millions of dollars to access it. So it's a really stupid system in New Zealand. If they've got this expensive, not as accurate data set from NIWA, which they say is available to buy, but no one can afford it, or I can go to another country and get it for free, or basically for free, and it's way more accurate and user-friendly. So it's a really bizarre situation New Zealand's got itself into, and there's a lack of parents in the room in the government. That's why we're in this situation.
Now, the Metservice, for example, is freely available. I imagine, NIWA's weather forecast is freely available too in New Zealand. Is that the same for you? WeatherWatch New Zealand is freely available too, or do I pay for my daily forecast?
We have more data for free for you to use than NIWA and Metservice combined. So does that make any sense to you, that you fund two government agencies to provide a product that's not as good as the one that we can get from offshore? And it makes you think, well, why on earth are we about to give NIWA another $30 million for this another computer that, as far as I know, is roped off only for the highest commercial use, like America's Cup. So they were all in the America's Cup. NIWA, a Crown Research Institute, blocking out the private sector and using basically what I believe is weaponising a state asset. And when we met with Peter Dunn, former senior minister in Parliament, he's a real supporter of ours from United Future, or formerly from, and he can't understand this. He keeps saying, why is the government the one that's in control of weather forecasting? Since when was that a thing? And why do we have two agencies that not only do weather forecasting but don't work together and keep wanting more money from the public? And so this review that's coming in is being prompted, I think, by Metservice. I don't think Labor wanted it at all. If you listen to their language, they weren't talking about the double up. They were talking about climate change and systems, which to me was nonsense bureaucratic words.
Okay. Listen, the other thing is, in the last 24, 48 hours, you probably would have read the release of, I think it was under the Official Information Act. Radio New Zealand covered it anyhow. And that was how the Met Service admitted to themselves anyhow, that they'd stuffed up brilliantly at the start of the year in terms of the Auckland weather event that presaged Cyclone Gabriel. They said, we got it completely wrong. It was very difficult, but we stuffed it up. And in fact, yeah. Did you pick that? I mean, if they couldn't pick that then, did WeatherWatch?
So on that day, on the January 27th day, no forecaster had picked what was going to happen that afternoon. But by that afternoon, our IBM data was giving us alerts to say really significant rain, 200 millimetres on the way just for this afternoon, which I've never seen ever for Auckland. And so we used that information to our clients like Vector, who are the power lines company. And so we provided that information to them and to the council, who chose to ignore it. And we had those updates coming through. That's because IBM's data updates every 15 minutes from their global supercomputer. That's nothing like what we've got in New Zealand. But a really good point about that storm, once the flooding occurred, Metservice and their warnings were really good. They understood what was happening and their information was correct. What bugs me so much about where we're at now is you've got NIWA competing directly with them, and NIWA's a bigger agency with more money, and they are not sharing the information they've got. So you've got Metservice out there this week saying, well, we're going to improve our modelling and we're looking how to do that. And then you've got NIWA going, we need another $30 million for our supercomputer for modelling, which we don't share with Metservice and we don't give back to the public unless you pay for it. And it just seems corrupt to me. I can't think of another word for it, because it's so stupid that we've got this system with two agencies that don't work together, and NIWA in particular, who's anti-competitive towards the private sector.
Okay, well, we're going back to 1992, so I can remember being in Parliament at the time, and when they were created, both the Metservice and NIWA, as separate entities, Metservice were meant to focus on providing forecasting or warning service, and I think they still have a responsibility to civil defence to do that, while NIWA was going to focus on research, whatever research that was going to be. How did NIWA get into then forecasting as well?
First of all, NIWA will tell you they've always done forecasting, which is rubbish, because you just stated exactly what everyone else knows. And any grown-up who understands the industry knows that NIWA was about science and research, Metservice was about weather forecasting. That changed in 2013. The Listener did a really good story about it last year, saying that they seeked no government approval, they just went and did it. Peter Dunn told me that if he had known what NIWA was doing, he would have stopped them from doing it. So NIWA was a little bit dodgy, and they misled, the CEO of NIWA and the chairman misled a select committee only a few years ago when they said directly to the select committee, we are not competing with Metservice, and that was sort of he called me an agitator, that it's sort of that's coming from someone else. But then that same year, NIWA went and took the Department of Conservation directly off Metservice for weather services. I mean, you can't get more black and white. So it's a mess, and no one in government is taking responsibility for it. The last minister we talked to was Megan Woods. We met her in the Beehive in her office. She was the minister in charge for science for NIWA, and she said, I don't like what they're doing. I would change it if I could, but I can't change it. And all that National did was do a review. We'll do a lot more than that. But they didn't. They shelved that review. and grudgingly just launched another one on their last week before they left Parliament.